A security camera captured a white Vauxhall Corsa leaving the parking lot. In the early hours of the morning, the lone driver appeared to be a man keeping his head down. Phoenix Spencer Horn's car, a 21 plate, was still there, and that would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Phoenix was a well-loved young woman from East Kilbride, Scotland. She worked at a small hotel and cafe known for her warm and gentle nature. She once confided to someone that her boyfriend was the love of her life. Her boyfriend, a 27-year-old laborer, shared a modest ground floor flat with her. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises, sounds of an argument followed by an unsettling period of silence. On the cold night of November 16, 2024, Phoenix didn't show up for work or call her mother as she always did. As the day passed, her family and friends grew concerned. But the only responses they received were brief, harsh text messages that didn't resemble her voice at all. This continued for 2 days. The flat stayed silent, the curtains drawn tight, and only faint slivers of light slipped through the cracks. By the third morning, a strange odor had begun to spread. As Methin left the flat, Phoenix's car keys in his hand, his face remained blank, void of any emotion. What had actually happened behind that closed door? Where was Phoenix? And was her absence just an innocent trip, or was something far more disturbing concealed within that silence? Phoenix had worked a late shift at the Strat Haven Hotel on the night of November 16, 2024. Her mother received a brief text from her that read, "I'll call you tomorrow." That message would be the last contact she ever had with her daughter. Around 9 p.m., Phoenix returned to the ground floor apartment she shared with her boyfriend in a quiet East Kilbride neighborhood. Neighbors recalled that the living room light stayed on unusually late that night, only to switch off abruptly around midnight. Once the flat went dark, unsettling sounds began to echo through the quiet. Investigators later determined that around 12:13 a.m. was likely the critical moment. There were no shouts or loud crashes, just hours of eerie stillness. Yet, someone in the apartment above reported hearing running water and the scraping of something heavy being dragged across the floor as if a large object were being moved. Early the next morning, security footage captured Methin driving Phoenix's car out of the parking lot. He was wearing her jacket over his own, the hood pulled up. Though his expression looked somewhat somber, the camera still caught his face clearly. Over the following 2 days, he was spotted alone at gas stations, grocery stores, and a pharmacy. Always by himself with no sign of Phoenix anywhere. Friends grew increasingly concerned. Phoenix had never ignored her phone or missed a shift at the cafe. Yet this time, she did both. When a close friend texted her, the reply that came back felt wrong. "I need a break. Everything is okay." Phoenix almost never responded that quickly, and she certainly didn't use unusual punctuation. Her family Agreed, the message didn't sound like her. At all. By the afternoon of November 18th, a strange odor had begun drifting through the apartment hallway. A worried neighbor knocked on the door, but it was locked from the inside. Tension spread through the building when an ambulance drove past without stopping. Around the same time, a woman in the neighboring building spotted Methin from her balcony. He sat motionless, staring blankly into the distance while clutching a nearly empty bottle of wine. Everyone in the neighborhood felt on edge, unsure of what was happening. When officers first arrived for a welfare check, they had to force the door open, believing someone inside might be ill. But before they could take any action, Methin suddenly appeared at the entrance of the building. He didn't speak a word. He simply stared at them. One of the young officers later described the encounter as unsettling. It was as if Methin had just returned from a place no one should ever go. What had unfolded inside those four walls? And in a disturbing twist, it wasn't the victim's mother or a neighbor who contacted the authorities. Methin himself was the first to call the police. He had spent nearly 2 days inside an apartment filled with the smell of death. On the morning of November 18, 2024, he finally stepped outside and called 911. His voice on the recording was flat and emotionless, nothing like someone who had just committed a crime or stumbled upon a tragedy. The operator later admitted that his tone sent a chill through her. When officers arrived, Methin was already standing at the building's front door. He didn't try to flee or resist, but he showed no emotion either. He held the keys loosely in his hand, his eyes dull and his expression vacant. Inside the flat, there were no signs of a struggle and no indication that anyone had forced their way in. The apartment was mostly untouched. Plates and utensils were still set out on the table, and half a glass of red wine remained on the stove. Everything was disturbingly tidy. But that eerie calm vanished the moment officers stepped into the bedroom. Phoenix's body had been savagely dismembered, left on the floor among blood-soaked clothing. Her head had been placed carefully off to the side. Mark suggested the killer had tried and failed to remove her limbs completely. The room wasn't even chaotic. The only noticeable pool of blood was beneath the bed. There were no drag marks, no blood trailing into the hallway. Phoenix's phone was found on the table, and before she died, she had managed to type a message containing just 2 words. She was so terrified that she never sent it. When questioned, Methin offered nothing useful. He repeatedly claimed he couldn't remember anything, insisting his mind felt foggy. At first, some officers wondered if drugs might have triggered a violent outburst. But the phone records quickly disproved that theory. Data recovered from Phoenix's phone revealed a series of messages sent to her mother after Phoenix was already dead. The texts were fragmented, oddly spaced, and completely emotionless. Most importantly, they didn't sound like Phoenix at all. Her family immediately recognized that the Tone and style were nothing like her usual writing. One by one, the troubling details began to align. Unsent messages, unsettling replies, and a crime scene that was disturbingly pristine. Slowly, the entire picture started to unravel. The unhinged killer persona Methin tried to create wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. A plan built on preparation, cleanup, emotional manipulation, and precise timing. No one could have predicted that the seemingly harmless text messages would become the first clues revealing the true nature of the man she once called her soulmate. At first glance, the scene appeared unusually calm. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, no overturned furniture. Phoenix's bedroom was spotless, almost unnaturally so. But it was that very cleanliness that exposed the truth. Forensic experts quickly realized this wasn't the aftermath of a struggle. It was an apartment scrubbed so meticulously that nearly every trace of the crime had been wiped away. The area under the bed was the only spot initially overlooked. There, investigators discovered a long, broken trail of blood hidden beneath a thin layer of dust. It appeared as though someone had attempted to drag a heavy object in the same direction. Phoenix's body was eventually found, suggesting she had been moved after death. A single disposable latex glove, not belonging to the victim, was found on the floor behind a cabinet. Strong soap used less than 6 hours earlier was still detectable in the bathroom. The horrifying truth gradually emerged once Phoenix's body was sent for autopsy. She had died around 12:30 a.m., 6 hours after Methin had made his vague, misleading report. On November 17, it was determined that Phoenix's neck had been strangled with such force that she had little chance to resist. Her arms showed no cuts or bruises, and there were no signs of a struggle. It appeared she may have been struck from behind or was unconscious during the attack. Clutched in her hand was a small strand of black hair that did not belong to her. Forensic scientists also discovered human tissue under her toenails which matched Methin's DNA. These clues, the hidden gloves, the partial trail of blood, and the precise, clean manner in which she was strangled, didn't suggest a spontaneous act. Instead, they pointed to a calculated, methodical killer. Someone who had planned the crime and cleaned the scene with precision. Yet, there remained one small detail the forensic team could not immediately explain. The victim's left wrist bore a faint scratch. A small detail that didn't immediately make sense, but would later gain clarity as more evidence emerged. From the beginning, the police knew that Methin was the last person to have contact with Phoenix. He not only lived with her, but was also the one to call the authorities, a gesture that seemed responsible yet unnervingly composed. Investigators understood that a confession doesn't always reveal the full truth. They had encountered that before. It was the suspicious sequence of events that raised deeper doubts. In this case, Methin claimed they had argued that Phoenix had threatened to leave for good and that he had lost Control. Yet, whenever anyone pressed him for the time of the incident, he consistently dodged the question. At times, Methin claimed the events happened late at night. At other times, he said early in the morning. An agent noticed his evasive behavior, avoiding eye contact, licking his lips, and quickly changing the subject. All done unconsciously. Rather than confront him directly, the police opted for psychological tactics, presenting him with evidence instead of asking pointed questions, such as CCTV footage showing Phoenix's car leaving the parking lot in the early morning hours. Methin stumbled. When asked, "Do you remember who was driving the car?" he replied, "I think it was me, but I don't remember where I went." His answer raised red flags, especially since he had been texting Phoenix's mother to offer comfort at the time. A critical piece of evidence soon surfaced. Methin had claimed he called the police the following morning upon discovering the body. Yet, officers found a photo of Phoenix's body on his phone taken at 2 a.m. stored in a hidden folder. There was no doubt that he not only knew what had happened, but had also attempted to document the horrific act for reasons that remain unclear. Behavioral experts were consulted, and they concluded that Methin didn't appear genuinely shocked. Instead, he was carefully crafting the image of a grieving boyfriend, masking his guilt behind a facade of false emotion during questioning. A seasoned detective asked what seemed like an inconsequential question. "Did you see a small knife while you were cleaning the blood off the floor?" Methin responded, without thinking. Somehow, the existence of the black-handled knife, something never mentioned before, was revealed. The room fell into stunned silence. Slowly, the carefully constructed mask began to crack layer by layer. At the same time, forensic evidence deepened the suspicions. Phoenix had been killed from behind, explaining why Methin's DNA was found under her fingernails. Police also discovered a paper bag in the trash behind the apartment containing long strands of hair that matched Phoenix's. There were no indications of a struggle. Instead, the scene suggested prolonged, methodical, and intense control. Investigators uncovered numerous old text messages in which Phoenix tried to break up with Methin only for him to respond with threats. "If you leave, I don't know what I'll do." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a neighbor's old security camera. The elderly man had always worried about safety, but no one had paid much attention to it. At 3 a.m., the footage captured Methin carrying a large bag from his apartment to his car. His hunched posture and the way he deliberately avoided the camera directly contradicted his claim that he had been sitting still at home in shock. The sequence of events became clearer. After killing Phoenix, Methin remained at the apartment, showered, and cleaned up. He then set about planning his next moves. Driving around, sending deceptive texts, and disposing of the murder weapon. Sometimes he stopped at gas stations. Other times, he simply stayed in his car, scrolling through his phone or even watching pornography. When questioned about these behaviors, he shrugged them off, saying, I can't control myself. What might have seemed minor became crucial evidence. Which shoes found in his car? GPS data from his phone revealed that he had driven to a muddy area along the Clyde River early that morning. When police investigated further, they discovered a bloodied cloth and a torn section of a medical waste bag, both containing DNA that matched Phoenix. The fabricated statements, blood traces, and footage from the neighbor's camera all helped reconstruct a calculated, methodical crime. Methin had not lost his composure. He had carefully planned every step, spinning a story of innocence so convincing that it initially fooled everyone. Yet, no scheme is flawless, and even the most intricate crimes can be revealed by a single misstep caught on camera. On June 17, 2025, both Yu and Methin were formally charged with first-degree murder and attempted obstruction of justice. The case went to trial at Glasgow High Court, drawing global attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and the chilling demeanor of the defendant. The judge watched as Methin entered the courtroom, his face pale and eyes vacant, as if he no longer believed the story he had been telling. In a shocking turn, he completely reversed his earlier statements. He stopped claiming innocence and admitted, "I didn't mean to kill her. All I could do was hold on to her." He went on to blame drugs, cocaine, and overwhelming emotions. Methin claimed the cuts had been driven by fear, not malice or remorse. The courtroom wasn't merely shocked. It was dumbfounded. How could someone meticulously clean up the blood, send fake texts, hide the hair in the trash, and then spend hours in a car watching pornography? The contradiction was almost unbelievable. If there was any doubt, the evidence spoke for itself. The bagged hair, the phone, the photos of the body, the DNA under Phoenix's nails, chemical residues in the bathtub, and the chain of fake text messages, all captured on camera, showed that this was not a series of random acts. Each step had been carefully planned and executed. In the end, the prosecutor noted that while someone might lose control for a moment, they cannot remain in that state for 48 hours. During that entire period, Methin's mind was clear enough to clean the crime scene, send fabricated texts, and lie in court. The defense had little to counter this. They attempted to argue that Methin had a history of psychosis, depression, and drug abuse, but the meticulously documented timeline left little room for doubt. But as the prosecution emphasized, mental illness is not a justification for violent crime. Methin hadn't lost control. He simply didn't belong in society. A pivotal moment came during the trial, when one of Phoenix's old friends was called to testify. She recalled receiving a text from Phoenix's number just hours after her death and insisted immediately that it was not her friend's voice. Her voice trembled as she spoke. It was cold, detached, and emotionless. The messages themselves looked as if they had been typed by someone else. A small detail that carried enormous weight. That moment struck the final blow to Methin's facade. He lowered his head, clenched his hands, and averted his gaze from everyone in the courtroom. The verdict was delivered on July 14, 2025. Life in prison with a minimum of 23 years before eligibility for parole. The courtroom fell into silence. Methin showed no panic, no anger, no remorse. He simply accepted the sentence as if it had always been inevitable. From the family section came a choked sob, and many people began to weep upon hearing the tragic story. Some called for the death penalty, while others quietly left, unable to bear it any longer. Yet, one undeniable truth remained. Taking a life is a cruel act. No matter how divided opinions may be, no matter what excuses a criminal offers, he cannot escape the consequences of his actions. Phoenix Spencer Horn died at just 21 years old. She had a radiant smile and dreams she still hoped to achieve. Dreams that were cruelly cut short. Her death didn't just end a life. It extinguished a bright future. Friends and family were left devastated, and the town has yet to fully recover from the shock. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.